Our team, Dr. Josh Wagner here with Dr. Torry Hinson. I'm going to give a quick intro because Torry is a wealth of knowledge and value, and it's going to be a conversation in this featured Dr. Share. Torry is one of my favorite chiropractors. He's just an incredible person, an amazing, amazing chiropractor, but husband, father, just person who walks alongside us. I have the utmost respect for him. And to know when we first met, how stuck he was, banging his head against the wall, even
Mhm.
though he was one of the best clinicians in the world, and he still had people travel from all over the place and get incredible results, far better than typical chiropractors. He still struggled with basic chiropractic frustrations, and he's going to share what those were and three of the most valuable shifts he's made that has not only allowed him to double plus his collections, um, but have a 3 week plus new patient wait list, open up a new practice multiple times the size of when we first started, when he was working out of a room, and just like enjoy practice and of course when finances are working out, life goes better. And to have that knowledge of like the future is going to be great. I'm not afraid, I know I'm going to be able to retire one day. I know I'm going to be financially free. That's what lights me up, helping good chiropractors get to that level and love being in practice. So, Tori, anything you want to share, like just background, like to relate to other chiropractors, maybe how many years you've been in practice, where you practice,
So
where you went to school,
yeah,
things like that.
so this is my 23rd year in practice, which just sounds absolutely nuts. Um, and I'm in just in a suburb of Boise, Idaho. I originally started my first practice outside of Austin, Texas, in a little town called Marble Falls. It was a town of about 7,000 people, and but there was a lot of surrounding little towns, so I really had about a 80,000 person group to draw from. Um, And then, of course, that little town took a really big hit in 2008 when the crash came, and that kind of put me in a position where I had to move. So I relocated to Houston, Texas. I was in downtown in a big practice I'd been invited into, and um, I was there about 4.5 years. And without going into too much detail, that kind of fizzled out. That fell apart because of some of the choices of one of the docs there. Um, and so at that point,
Without saying names, like give some examples because it's good for docs to hear, like, hey, what caused something to collapse or fizzle
yeah,
out?
yeah,
No names, but like, what was it?
yeah, no, this was a multi-million dollar practice. There was probably four or five of us. The gentleman who started the practice, brilliant clinician, brilliant doctor, actually taught for one of the nutrient companies out there, taught seminars for them. Ended up getting in a lot of criminal trouble. That's put him in. He's sentenced to prison for life now. Um,
Insurance fraud, motor vehicle accident
uh, it
stuff.
was he was basically charged with molesting his own kids, and
Okay.
that was yeah. Not yeah, it was a pretty bad deal. It kind of shocked everyone, and so everyone kind of had to go their separate ways. So here I am, 40 years old at the time, and just had taken, I built this big practice for about 10 and a half years in this small town, and then life happens. Some things happened, like the economy was outside of my control. What this guy did and how it disrupted the practice of the other four of us in there was outside of my control. And so when I was 40 years old, I decided, when I first finished chiropractic school, I wanted to go to Idaho. My mom, I usually came up here in the summers to visit my mom. And as a kid, I loved Idaho, and it had always just kind of stuck with me. And so at 40 years old, I knew I could start another practice. This would be my third. And so I decided I was going to come to Idaho and start off. And I had to find some office space, and I found a little executive suite inside a really popular outdoor shopping mall area that had like executive suites there. And so it wasn't long after that, went through a divorce as well. It was rough. I mean, there was a lot of stuff.
All right.
And
So let's,
so,
I want to pause you there for
yeah,
everyone to relate. So, you don't have to raise your hand, but like went through a divorce. That's a lot of stress no matter what's going on in life at the same time around starting a new practice. So just think about your situation and what you're battling against in practice. Torry went through a divorce. It doesn't get much tougher than that, social wise and life wise. Moved to a place where he wasn't from, didn't know anyone, so started from scratch. Did you start all cash or you switched to all cash?
No, I've been all cash my entire career. No
Okay.
insurance ever.
So I'm just saying all these things that make it tougher, like emotional, personal turmoil, starting in an area where no one knows you, all cash, um, no storefront at all. He was in an executive suite in a building. So like no one walking by, driving by would know you exist, right, Tori?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other things that were like didn't make it easier for you?
Um, I had one son who was serving as a missionary in Liberia out of the country, and then I had another son who decided that he wanted to experiment with drugs and alcohol. So I was kind of having to deal with him as well, on top of going through obviously the divorce and the separation and everything at that time, while trying to build a practice from nothing. I mean, I had no patience, right? It
Kids
was
with
rough.
trouble
Yeah,
and
and
needing attention. Um, and then lastly, Tori, what is your technique and approach when it comes to um,
yeah.
chiro care and care in general?
Yeah, so my practice is kinesiology based, so I test a lot of muscles. Just in a nutshell, it's a combination of kinesiology. We test 276 different muscles on either side of the body, combined with chiropractic, and I do a lot of neurological work with low level lasers.
Awesome. Now, do you even remember, was it pre-COVID or after COVID where we first started working together?
It was COVID had just started in, I want to say it was March,
Yeah.
and I think you and I started in June, like a few months
Got
after that.
it. Okay. I just know it's been an awesome 4 years or so.
Yeah.
Um, so share when you reached out, what were like, how were you feeling? What were the stuck points that a chiro can relate to? Like what was just where were you hitting your head against the wall in practice?
Yeah, well, at the time, I was, I had basically leveraged the power of social media, um, and word of mouth. Those are the two ways I attracted patients. But at that time, I was getting great results clinically. I mean, people were raving. But at the same time, one of the things I struggled with was, um, uh, I guess and with your help, I was able to kind of figure this out, charging what I'm worth. I mean, that was one of my biggest struggles. Um, I was getting results and I don't mean to come across as arrogant or anything like that, but I was getting results people were getting nowhere else. And I was having a lot of patients come to me who were familiar with chiropractic. I mean, they had seen chiropractors, but for one reason or another, they were just like getting the same thing every time, and they just felt like they weren't progressing. And so, but at the same time, you had patients coming into the office who were used to the mindset of, how much do you charge for an adjustment, right? How much, and so this adjustment became their gauge as to, oh, if I'm going to go see this person or not. um, and at that time, I was charging based on, I've since changed this, but at the time I was charging based on, per muscle, like how much I was, because there was a process to fixing the muscle plus the adjustment and all this other stuff. And so my mentor that I learned from was charging a certain amount per
Your
muscle.
technique mentor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and this is a guy who had worked in pro sports, had worked with some very well-known people throughout the world. I mean, he was written about, talked about in a book, and here's this guy who's been doing it for 40 years. And so then that was a struggle whenever I first met Josh. And is there anything I need to say before I get to that point, or
Were you about to say something risque? I don't even know.
no, but my wife knows that I'm used to saying risque things.
No, no.
So
Well, I guess
I don't blame you
so.
for asking.
No, you just started to dive in, but essentially, Tori's going to speak on three specific themes that made the shift for him to be able to more than double and like just waiting list practice, even though he started as already getting incredible results. Like, of course, he's a student of his craft, so he's always increasing, and he would say he's so much better than he was 5 years ago. Guys, 4 or 5 years ago, he'd come to a seminar and everyone's asking Torry to like fix this, fix this, fix this. So what I want you to relate to is it is so common for chiropractors to be masters of their craft and get incredible results and not be able to pay the bills at the end of the month.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what's messed up, and that's what Torry could relate to. And that's one of our primary focuses of like, we're going to fix this without you having to be salesy, without you having to take as much as you can from insurance companies, because a lot of chiropractors don't trust that you can actually do good work and help people and tell them the truth and not overprescribe or overcharge either. And you get compensated what you want to have the life you want, save for the future, knock out your debts. So with that, Torry, like one of your big things was he didn't think he could charge more than the person who taught him his technique because that person was a better maybe technique and clinician than him.
Yeah.
Go from there, like how you started to let that go.
Well, and just let me back up a little bit. I was real hesitant because I had tried other, practice management or practice coaches in the past, and all of them wanted to do the same thing. They wanted to basically change the way I was practicing, and get me to basically switch to an adjusting high volume practice. And I was not going to do that. So I was a little leery when you and I first met, because I was like, guys, if this guy tries to get me to change what I'm doing, we're done. But then, you were the first.
I thought it was because of how handsome I was.
What was that too? But it was, and I felt inferior to you from the looks department. But no, I think the issue was
Okay,
is
Josh
that
Brolin.
well,
Anyone see that? Anyone see that? Yeah.
and so I think what happened is it was so refreshing, when you and I first started, because I think I may have brought that up to you at the very beginning. Like, look, I mean, I'm not going to change the way I practice. I get amazing results. And then I remember, and this is what still makes me laugh to this day. This was in COVID, where people, like, it was a ghost town, and where my office was. People were not out shopping. It's the most popular place in town, and it was dead. And Josh comes along and goes, I think what you need to do is you need to raise your rates. And I just started laughing, and I went, you got to be kidding me. And at first I thought, nah, this is not starting out well. But then he said, hey, what's the worst that could happen? They could say no. And so I remember he goes, when's your next patient? And I said, oh, about an hour from now. And he's like, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. You're going to raise that rate. And it wasn't just a raise. It was more than double. And I thought, this guy is just, I was like, okay, what do I have to lose? So next patient comes in, do an exam, find all these things. I'm like, look, here, based on what I'm seeing, this is what I'm going to recommend. She's like, sounds great. When can we get started? And my jaw was on the floor. And then, of course, your mind starts talking you out of it. You're just like, oh, that was just a fluke. But then the next new patient, and the next, and the next, and the next. And lo and behold, they're all accepting my recommendations at those rates.
Let's break this down for a second.
During COVID.
A chiro might be hearing this and think, oh yeah, every coach just says raise your rates. It's like, no, I don't tell that to every doc I start working with. It was because Torry was stuck in a model twofold. One, I can't charge more than like what was it? Maybe it was around like $80 a session.
He would charge $50 per muscle.
And you were charging at that time 35 or something?
No, I was charging 50. I was charging the same as him. Yeah.
I remember like you felt you couldn't go above him. That was one red flag of how you were setting your fees. You're setting your fees compared to someone else, rather than fees are no different than the woman you choose to marry. It's your choice and what is inherently right for you, not based on your neighbors or what other colleagues do or anything like that. So that one, you had a false understanding of how you even charge, and you were charging based on the service. And I mean, within the realm of staying compliant, you were communicating it to patients within the realm of the service rather than the realm of getting back to their life. And just when you think about that, like, Torry, you could do this in your sleep. You could check muscles. You could fix conditions in your sleep. So it's not inherently valuable to you because it's so easy. And a lot of chiropractors, for you to do a cervical adjustment, a side posture, do a scan, do an x-ray, that's, you could do it in your sleep. And when you think about your fees based on that, you're down here. But when you think about your fees of helping people sleep through the night, have energy during the day, be pain-free, get back to picking up their children, get back to swinging a golf club, get back to their life, do you know how many thousands of dollars, let alone tens of thousands, let alone hundreds of thousands, that's inherently worth to the person? And when you start thinking about that's what you're giving them, not an adjustment, not a little Twixie dust laser, not
Mhm.
you X technique or Y technique. When you're helping them get back to their life, you take a whole new understanding on the value. And that's why I told Tori, you're not charging enough for the results you get in the amount of time you're able to get them. Old school chiropractic is we need to see someone for a year to charge them a lot of money. That's old school. That's banging your head against the wall. New school chiropractic is how quickly can I get someone well? That's valuable. And it doesn't mean you're never going to see them again. It's going to be referrals and a patient for life.
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest things that the besides charging what I was worth, and then I started to realize it was like everyone's accepting these. Now, let me back up a little bit. Not only had I raised my fees, but it was the new patient process that you teach, as well as the recommendations conversations that you teach.
Right. You can't
That
just like say, oh, yeah, it's
right.
this much. And
It was, and again, the consult is about helping them get their lives back. And when my mentality shifted from helping them get their lives back and making sure that that's a focus. Like when they would come in, how are you doing? Are we getting you? How are we doing? And they would be like, I said, so you're not. We're going to get you back on the back hiking up in the mountains, or we're going to get you kayaking again, or whatever. I kept bringing it back to that, right? And that's when people realized he cares about me. He doesn't care about, like, yes, I'm paying him um, good money, but it started becoming more about them. And and then I think when I sat down with recommendations conversations, it was easy. I mean, and just to give you some context, I do a consult, exam, and recommendations all in the same day, right?
because you
I
can and
mean,
it's easy and you
yeah,
should. Yeah.
I don't break it up into 2 or 3 visits. Now, my mentor, it would be a 2 or 3 visit process. And so when I made that change, patients, they don't, I mean, they want to actually say, okay, tell me what's wrong and let's get on with it, not drag it out 2 or 3 or appointments. And if that's what you do, that's fine, especially if that's working for you. But where I am, I just found that people prefer to know, hey, let's do the exam, let's do the consult, the exam, and the recommendations conversation in the same day.
And society has changed. In the 80s
Yeah.
and 90s, when chiropractic management came out, people needed the sales dog and pony show sequence. Now that repels people. People
Mhm.
want help and they'll pay more to get it sooner rather than we have to justify charging 3 grand by seeing you for a year. That's old school practice management. And just
Yeah.
because it's still being taught today. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I can't tell you how many compliments we have received because patients say, not only was that the most thorough exam I've ever had, but it was just smooth. There wasn't this formal, okay, let's sit down and let's have this awkward talk about money, right? Because when you center it all around helping them get their lives back, then it's easy. It's actually hilariously easy. It blows your mind. And I think that following new patient consult and recommendations, which isn't like this scripted thing, right? It's a guideline and it can be adapted to every situation. And I think I love that too, because it wasn't the common practice management scripts. I mean, there's a flow to it, but you make it your own. And um, but I think honestly, Josh, where I get the most benefit for me, as we talked about at the very beginning of the call, all the different challenges I had to go through, was the deserving process technique that you teach as well.
Right. So
Um,
we're switching now from the value you put on yourself and the results you're
mhm.
getting, giving you the access to up fees easily and dramatically.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that was you said you more than doubled them when we first started, but from the
Mhm.
beginning, how much, like what percentage higher are they now? Because I know you keep
Um,
increasing.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd probably increase it a little bit more, but but there's a little bit of resistance from my front desk person, and because we're so overwhelmed with people, and I'm trying to help kind of create some additional space for new patients, but it doesn't seem to matter. Like I could raise it another 50, $100 a visit, and it's just it's not causing problems. Like people aren't slowing down. Like it continues. And so my idea was, I'll raise the fees a little bit to kind of thin the herd, but it doesn't seem to phase anyone because they want results and they want it fast.
And just a side note before we switch on to Headspace is even though you have a, I don't want to say per visit or per muscle fee, like just in compliance wise, you have to have a breakdown
Mhm.
to keep it legal. But when you're giving someone a plan to get them fixed, get back to their life, you're pretty much letting them know, hey, this is what it's going to be to get that done, rather than it's going to be this amount per muscle. I got to do 32
Mhm.
muscles for
Yeah.
16 times. And then you've
Yeah.
just lost them. And they're like, I got to speak to my husband. I'm going to go to the joint down the street. That seems easier. So you
Mhm.
also don't get into the whole rigmarole that most chiropractors are taught. You've got to explain everything line item by line item, and
Yeah.
they've got to agree and accept and understand subluxation. It's like, no, they don't care.
Yes, no, I agree. I think that was one of the I've had no patients that I can recall off the top of my head. I could be wrong. I've had no patients who've ever asked me to give me a breakdown of what that's, what all that entails. And I think it's because of the consult and recommendations conversation and how we structure that. And I mean, I have patients that pay me anywhere from say $1,500 up to $8,900. It's a very big gap, but it's based on their need and what they, not what, it's tailored to their particular situation.
And
Um,
we'll just finish off on this. Whatever they're paying you is minuscule compared to the value they're getting for the rest of their year, let alone decades ahead by getting fixed. No different with your patients, for those of you who are watching, listening.
yeah. And I think that in order to make those changes I had to make, because here's the problem. I had I knew that I was never going to break through to the next level of practice unless I learned new skills, and I learned how to um uh take those new skills and apply them to my situation. So initially when we started working, I kind of hit a ceiling, right? I mean, I was implementing all this stuff, but at the time I was a one man show. And so keep that in mind. I was a one man show. And so I knew that in order to break through the next level, I needed to bring an assistant in. Okay. That required new skills and of dealing with that and structuring that. But because I was making all these changes and doing it all in a relatively short period of time, so this is where the headspace stuff comes in. My brain was very resistant to stuff. Um, and I had problems that, mental and emotional issues, from, the having to leave my first practice, right? I don't know why the thumbs up thing just came up there. Did I do that or did someone else do that?
Because
I
we're
don't
in
know.
Zoom culture. Yeah.
Yeah. So what ended up happening was, Josh started teaching me the deserving process. You know, I'm a I'm a very religious person, and I believe in meditation. I also believe in prayer. So I do both. And I think meditation is more of me getting out of my own head than it is as far as a religious thing. But working through in that deserving process about my fees, about things in the past regarding my previous marriage that I had to get over, um, things about having, in my mind, failed in two previous practices, even though okay, that really wasn't the case. But emotionally and mentally, I was telling myself that who's going to want to give you that kind of money when this is your third practice, you know and but doing that deserving process was huge, and I still do it. And the energy you bring to the office, this is one of the biggest things I think Josh I mean, you helped me with a lot of stuff, but I think the energy I bring to the office is people pick up on it. If you're going through a separation and a divorce, if you're building a house and that's on your mind, if you have a child who, like me, I had a son who struggled with some stuff, drugs and alcohol. Um, it was challenging. And because I did the deserving process, and there were times when I wasn't perfect at it, but I just tried to be consistent. And there were times when I would show up at the office, and let me tell you, I was under a lot of stress. So I needed to do both prayer and the discerning process because the weight of the world was on my shoulders, and I felt like I was in it all by myself. But doing that allowed me to come to the office and not let that outside stuff begin to spill over into patient care. I was able to show up with a good energy. Patients felt that. Um, Whether you believe in that stuff or not, people
Yeah.
subconsciously pick up on it.
Tori, I'm glad you're picking up on like the resistances you had to get through, because I find that so much with chiropractors is maybe it's, oh, I meditation, it's too woo woo for me. I'm not vegan. I don't do yoga. Like that's just not
Yeah.
for me. When it
Yeah.
has
I'm
nothing.
not vegan either.
Yeah.
I love
Or
bacon.
no, like meditation or the deserving process, because I have to like get in touch with my feelings, goes against my religion or what,
Mhm.
Christ advocates. It's like, no, it doesn't go against any of that. And it's not telling you not to do that. It's being able to balance it. And then just from a business owner, guys, I was talking to a friend today. He's not a chiropractor. He's a very successful business owner who does a 10-day silent meditation retreat every year at like a center. And he's like, Josh, I go to the one in Texas out of the 10 that you can go to in the country because even though it's silent and you're not connecting with people, he's like, that's where all the billionaires go. That's where all the CEOs of the biggest companies go, and all the Bentleys are out front and they wear their sunglasses and have their hats on, and they go multiple times a year. And it's there's so much ridiculous resistance from chiropractors about doing something that is proven to just move you forward. And if you follow it, you're not going to get it from reading the book. You've got to get instruction, get past the hangups, listen to the audio, and do it day after day. And things shift in your life. It's
Yeah.
remarkable.
No, it is. And I think that, because I've had some people ask me about that, and I'll just touch on this a little bit more before we move on. But, um, you know, I am, I'm a very religious individual. I read scriptures every day. I spend 30 minutes in scriptures every day. I pray, but I look at meditation as something separate for that. I'm not placing my faith in meditation, if that makes sense. My faith is in God and in his son, but I'm not placing my faith in meditation. So I think there's a separation there. But sometimes it's about focusing on um, uh, the stresses. And if you learn the deserving process, you'll learn that it's phenomenal how, as you start to really focus on that, the more you focus on that and it intensifies, eventually it just dissipates. And it's like this huge weight comes off of you and your mind is clear, right? And if someone can get that with prayer alone, by all means, in my religious faith, I pay tithing, I pray, I read scriptures, I attend, church meetings. I also fast, once a month. I do all those spiritually based things, and I found that this technique is a way to get out of my own head.
Think of it, it's like physical exercise, but for the mind and emotions.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with, it's not interfering with any faith or religion. Um, so let's get back to the headspace. Like, Tor, what were some of the general themes that you applied the deserving process to? Like, I remember one that you hadn't said yet, and I don't think you're going to be upset if I mention it. It was
No, go ahead.
connected to mistakes you had made with finances and the grief your ex-wife had given you. And even though you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
you guys were divorced,
Yeah.
um, like there was still a lot of just fear and attachment to like I'm not doing the right things because I have her in my ear.
Oh, yeah. She was exactly right. We had been divorced. This was This was years. I think it had been a few years uh, that we had been divorced, and but yeah, um, a lot of those emotions of just kind of kept hanging with me, and so I think what was really really cool for me is I went through and did the deserving process. A lot of times, what ended up happening is I started to realize that a lot of these beliefs regarding finances, were things I picked up as a kid. You know, my dad was a police officer for 40 years, worked his butt off, had a family of 6 kids. We lived in apartments or trailers or rented houses our whole life. My parents didn't own their first home till after I had already moved out of the house. I was older. Um, and he was doing the best he could with what he knew. And but managing finances was tough. And so I never really had someone who taught me that stuff. And so what so as I cleared all that stuff out in the deserving process, and then you started to teach the financial mastery stuff, right? As I cleared out these old beliefs and some of these things that were getting in my way when it came to finances and deserving um, a good income, deserving the money I was earning, right? Um, it enabled me to take the financial mastery stuff where now I had a system, right? um, and I could, and I think the thing I loved the most is that now that I had kind of cleared some of the stuff, you still need the tools,
Hmm.
right? I mean, you may clear out the headspace, but if you don't have the tools and the skills, then you're gonna just keep doing the same thing, like the definition of insanity. You're just gonna
Or
keep
just
going in circles.
we're just winging it and thinking it'll
Yeah,
naturally get better. It's like, no, when you wing it, things don't naturally get better.
yeah. And then now, and this is, and just to be for transparency, right? This is stuff I'm still working on. I mean, I'm not like 100% clear of this, um, but man, knowing that there's a system and knowing that if I follow that system, and I think you said something in our mastermind group where you said percentage, without getting into the whole financial mastery thing, but percentage is more important than dollars, I think is one of the things you had mentioned, right? So I just focused on making sure that money was distributed, the right percentage was distributed to each of the accounts. And the crazy thing is, as soon as I started doing that, man, it took a huge weight off my shoulders, right? I just know all I have to do is just keep doing that. I don't need to worry about the numbers, with the exception of making sure that I do my due diligence and start funneling the right percentage into the right account. And even though, my wife and I are still working on that, but we have a plan, and we're starting to see how that works. We don't stress out about money, you know. Um, Even this past year, where I was doing a bunch of additional training, I probably spent over $20,000 on this additional training because I just love to learn. I love to keep adding to my skill set. Um, I went to several different patient mastery events, joined Mastermind, all of which cost additional money. But you know what? Because of that system, because of that financial mastery, I didn't need to worry about it. You know?
And Tori, I feel like this is the first time in your life that money isn't like a huge worry.
No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's still more debts to pay off. I mean, I don't want to paint the picture that I've got it all figured out yet, but the fact that I have um, a rudder, and I've got a compass and I can steer the ship, and I know where to steer the ship, and I have a compass and a map to follow. Man, just that alone has taken a tremendous weight off my shoulders and off my mind, which then just spills over into practice, which makes me even better for my patients, which then kind of perpetuates the cycle.
Right.
You're better for your patients, you're bringing positive energy, things continue to grow.
You don't need them more than they need you,
Oh yeah.
which is a huge issue in our profession.
Which is what I struggled with too when we first met. So I'm glad you brought that up. That
I'm
was
gonna
another big thing.
I'm gonna speak to the percentage over number just because it probably went over some people's heads, and I'll give you a teaching point. So when it comes to money and finances and goals and growth, pretty much everyone gets locked into, where you are, and you most likely have different levels of where I want to be. Like, I'd want to be here in 3 months or a year or one day here. And all of that is pretty much numbers. Like, you may be stuck at 25,000 a month collections, 15,000 a month profits, and you want to get to 50,000 a month collections, 25,000, 30,000 a month profits. Awesome. Those are numbers. Um, Now, I mentioned profits. Somehow that seems to be a new concept in the chiropractic world since all the coaching I've ever been a part of, everyone only talks about volume and collections. And let's be honest, you all know, or you may not, there's a lot of high volume practices that can't pay the bills, can't even send their kids to college. So let's just throw that away. High volume does not mean you're making a lot of money.
Mm.
Next, we're talking about collections. Well, in chiropractic, the $1 million practice is like the shiny object. If you're making $1 million, and hypothetically, if your overhead is $1 million, well, then you can't even pay yourself. So that's what we're talking about, numbers compared to percentage. You want to make sure there are certain variables in terms of what your profits should be compared to your collections. Then, based on your profits, there's a certain percentage of what your life overhead should be compared to your profits, because it doesn't matter how much money you make profit if you're spending more of that in your life. So if you make 50,000 a month pure profit, but your overhead is 55,000, you're going in the wrong direction. You're going to be bankrupt. So we talk about percentages in terms of profit compared to collections, and then what you do with that profit. We have an 8-step cash flow that equals up to 100%, exactly how that goes. So you are safe, you are smart, you are responsible, you are knocking out debt, saving for the future, and giving your family the life they deserve as you increase your collections and profits, rather than the stereotypical sabotage of business owners is, as our collections and profits go up, we spend more in all areas, and then we have the same left over at the end of the month, which is maybe nothing. And really, really important. It's a huge sabotage. Dan, you wrote, is overhead always with an owner's salary factored in? The way I'm talking about it is no, not with the owner's salary. So profits would include whatever salary you pay yourself, plus the rest of the profits on top of that. Cool.
Yeah, and I'll even share. I'll even be more transparent because I don't know if anyone out there is struggling with this too. But when I was moving to Idaho and starting this practice, and just FYI, I've been in this practice now. I've been in Idaho now for 10 years. Um, uh, it ended up creating a tax debt, and so that was, it was even prior to moving to Idaho, and so this was a huge deal, and the cool thing about that was because I've got the newfound, like Josh was saying, I was so ate up with the technical side of things. If I could just fix people really, really good, all that other stuff would take care of itself. I was wrong, right? I had to have skills. I had to have the consult, the recommendation, the examination. I needed to learn how to manage money. And so that was but now, you know what? Now I don't have to, now that I've got this thing set in place, it's like, I don't stress anymore. But I know what it's like to be in your in your up to your eyeballs in debt, no, the sleepless nights, the stress, trying to put on a good face, showing up at the office the next day and trying to make everyone think that everything's just a-okay in your life. Um the bags under the eyes are part of that whole process. But um I think, Josh, more than anything, I have been it's just fun to come to work now. And I've got things set in place to where now I get to enjoy what I do. I don't have to, I've got these other things I have to deal with, but now I have the tools, the skills, and the systems in place that I'm constantly tweaking and refining with your help, because Josh and I still work together, obviously. And so, but you know what? Once you've got a compass, a map, a rudder, and the wind blowing your sails in the right direction, man, it's a great feeling. Even if you still have things you have to fix in life, even if your life isn't perfect.
Yeah, and Tori, I'll be transparent too. Like, there's stuff coming up for me in the last week or two where it's like, you know what? I need to get back to the deserving process for this significant stuff because it's been too long. And guess what? You don't do anything new or you keep doing the same thing for too long, things just break down over time. And yeah, it's not like, oh, you do it once and set forever. There's really nothing in life like that.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, I think my wife will sometimes, she gets a little worried that I enjoy working. I mean, um, I love puzzles. So when a patient comes in with a problem, I mean, like I had a lady with Parkinson's in here yesterday, who was told she wouldn't walk again, and I've got a video of her walking, you know? There is nothing cooler than knowing that you've got things in outside of practice going in a good direction. You got things in practice going in a good direction. Um, and you're getting results that's life-changing for patients, right? I mean, that woman has referred me 4 or 5 people in the last 24 hours. And, um, and it's just it's a wonderful feeling when, I mean, for me, I love knowing, hey, I can, if I have a question, I'm stumped or I'm unsure about a certain situation, um, I'm grateful I can text Josh. I can text you and say, "Here's what I'm dealing with. What do you think?" You know? Um, and I had a situation like that not too long ago, of a patient where I just kind of misjudged her care, like how much care she was going to need. Her case was a little more complicated than I had originally thought, and it was time to, she had kind of used the money that she had paid initially, and I kind of was like, well, how am I going to handle this? And I sent Josh a quick text, and I get a text back, and a few minutes later with a solution, and
You know, that's a good one. Let's just share that because,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's also
So
an example. It's an example of the answer you were looking for, how simple it actually was,
mhm,
how straightforward and honest it was. But hey, as a chiropractor, we get in our head.
mhm.
And so yeah, share the example again of like what was the stress.
Yeah, so her case was a little more complex than originally thought, and she had been seeing great results, but then she kind of hit this plateau, and um, you know, I have been guilty, as I'm sure maybe some of you guys are, maybe not. I don't know. I've been guilty sometimes of letting people have a visit here or there at no charge because I felt like I was trying to be a nice guy, and well, they're almost done, and but I started to realize how much money that was costing to do that. And my eyeballs almost fell out of my head when my wife kind of started pointing some things out to me. And let's, if I'm also being brutally honest, she's the CEO of this place. She just lets me work here, and I think she likes to remind me that I'm easily replaced if I don't toe the line. But anyway, no. So I had to talk to this patient. I just said, hey, Josh gave me a single sentence, and when I read it, I laughed
But okay,
because it was so simple.
just
It
to give
was
she was at the end of the initial prescribed
program.
month
Mhm.
of care that she had paid for,
Yeah.
and what percentage was she compared to where you thought or hoped she would be by then, like on the scale?
Oh, yeah. I really thought, I mean, I thought we would have had this thing fully resolved in a month. I mean, it initially did not seem like it was going to be a big issue. Um, and then, we're coming up on a month, and she was probably only like 70% resolved.
Cool.
And
So everyone can relate to that.
yeah,
It doesn't matter
yeah.
if it's a month, 2 months, 3 months. She's 70% where you were expecting 95, 100. And Tori was in his head of like, oh, like I expected to be there. How do I tell her she still has to keep paying for care when I thought it would be resolved at
I
this point? Totally
hadn't delivered.
understandable,
Yeah,
justifiable,
yeah.
humanistic Chiro thought. And
Because
you
I felt like I hadn't delivered the results that I
yeah,
originally thought I could.
yeah. And
And
like now
so
Tori's going to be the bad guy because she wasn't 100% and needs to pay more to keep progressing. And even though this is in the platform, you just hadn't stumbled upon that video. What did I tell you to say? That was simple enough.
I think if I remember the line, I believe it was something like, "Hey, you know what? Your case is far more complicated than I initially thought." That's
Simple
all
as
I
that.
said to her. And
Honest,
then
straightforward, professional. Your case turned out to be a lot more complicated than we initially thought. You were here, you've gotten to here, to get here, this is what we need to do.
I
Simple as
and
that.
and I think what helped that, Josh, was because of the the relationship we had developed because of the consult. She knew that I was in it for her and not in it for me or my gain. I mean, yeah, we have to keep the lights on. We have to make a living. but she knew that I had already gotten such a big change for her, but she was still needing more. But because of that relationship we had created as a doctor patient, because of the consult, and the fact that I made it about her, she didn't face it, didn't even face her. She's like, okay, what do you think? What do we need to do moving forward? And you know I said, well, based on my best, um, uh, what's the word I used, recommendation, probably about $1,500 more. She was like, okay, whipped out her checkbook, hand me the check, and she scheduled out, 5 more visits. And so, and just FYI, to clarify one other thing too, initially I've kind of changed the way I've done things. I now, because of some, I can do things faster than I used to. I kind of switched back to charging on an hourly, like a per hour basis, rather than a per muscle basis. So I don't know if I should mention that or not, but
Gonna get too complicated.
yeah.
Torry has a different approach than
Anyway,
most chiropractors. Hey, one thing, but I know we're getting close to the top
yeah.
of the. You had mentioned about this patient with Parkinson's who's walking. Did you grab a pre-video of when she came in before you started giving her care to both to document pre and post, even though you didn't know what was going to happen? We don't know what's going to happen with any patient, but
Yeah.
planting seed and having the evidence of major transformation rather than just someone's like, I can walk now, doesn't mean much compared to look at them then and look at them now, like visually.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe I do. I have to go look through I've got, on my phone, there's something like, my wife was laughing because I use the phone a lot for documenting video, before and afters. And I even upload it to their treatment notes, to show them like what kind of a change we've made, because people do forget how messed up they were when they first came to your office. But yeah, I do
And
have that.
it makes success stories and results that much more real
Oh
when you
yeah.
consciously choose, hey, this is just a little trick tip when you're doing an exam. So you haven't even started care, they haven't even paid you, let's say for care, paid you for the exam, but they are really antalgic in some way, shape, or form. You do a video then, a couple things it's going to do. One, now when you have the real success story, superimposing that, this is what it was, makes it that much more eye-opening. But
Mhm.
two, think about the seed that plants in that new patient's mind. This doc is documenting like what it looks like now because he or she is that confident that it's going to change.
Yeah.
And by the way, you're doing that all without lying, making up
Mhm.
stuff like this is going to change, or I guarantee, or I promise. No, you literally say, I expect this. You're being honest, you're being certain, you're being a leader, you're being professional. There are such nuances that our profession has lost in terms of like just being honest. Like you could be
Yeah.
honest and be certain, and that's what patients want. And they will pay you happily for honesty and certainty. You don't have to say stuff that isn't true.
Yeah. And I will say this too. When I do that, when I put that, show them befores and afters, especially when it comes to some of the types of patients I see, they're so disconnected from their bodies. They need to see that. Like,
Mm.
because sometimes they'll be like, hey, well, I can't really tell the difference because their reference point is so different. But then you show them, well, here's where you were when you first came in, and here's where you are now. They're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's a huge change, right? And then, side note, I had an interesting call, uh, or email, I think, from my accountant, because I moved into this new office space a year ago, and I've been implementing patient mastery stuff like crazy. And she goes, I just needed to double check with you. And I said, tell me why. She goes, because you doubled your like total collections. And is there a mistake? Did I make a mistake here? And I said, no. She goes, okay, don't be mad at me when you see your tax bill. But she said, I just wanted to make sure that it was right. Um, and I'm embarrassed. Josh will be mad at me, but I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that I usually keep track of things, but I guess I hadn't kept track of things on a macro level like that. And to me, when I saw that, it just hit me like all these little things, that these nuances you were talking about, everything from the consult, the recommendations, the deserving process, the financial mastery, all that stuff culminated into this email I received from my accountant. And I realized, whoa, look how far I've come from being in an executive suite, seeing one patient at a time in its tiny little room. I mean, my wife affectionately calls it the broom closet,
Yeah.
right?
And just like all of us, you're a work in progress and you're going in the right
Mhm.
direction. And it's
Yeah,
exciting to know where you're going to be. Um,
yeah,
I think you touched on, so we started with your fees compared to your value and what your fees are based on, moved into the deserving process of getting past normal human stuff that gets in our way. And then you moved on to taking charge, financial mastery, and like we're really moving into that in patient mastery of like being the CEO money CEO of your practice and of your life.
yeah.
And I believe that was a third. There wasn't a different third we didn't get to, was there?
No, I mean, I would just say that, charging what I'm worth, the deserving process, the new patient consult and recommendations, and then just the financial roadmap.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, um, and I think what has really blown my mind is just I'm not, and this is another thing I should bring up. I don't do any active marketing except for some social media posts, right? Like I don't sit out, I don't have, I mean, I have a sign outside this office, but I don't do any external
You don't
advertising.
pay for marketing and you don't do like
No,
physical
no,
screening stuff like
no.
that.
It is 100% via social media and via a word of mouth. And it's 100% cash. I've never done insurance in my entire career. That would just not, I mean, if anyone's doing insurance and it's working for you, by all means, great. But for me, it felt like more of a stress. And so my mentor, when I first started and got out of school, that's what he told us. He goes, never do insurance because your, um, the amount of money you're going to collect is never going to equal what you're worth and your value.
Hmm. And hey, I want to speak to that for a second too. The A lot of docs also think new patient attraction is linear of how much energy I put towards it or how much money I put towards it. And those can play a role without a doubt. I'm not at all against putting energy or money towards new patient attraction strategies and approaches.
Yeah.
However, what's really interesting is I find from so many docs out there that I've worked with is there's a strong correlation with the docs who get more than enough or more than the new patients, let's say they need, and actually don't put much effort or attention at all towards new patient attraction because they've got their house in order on the inside. And house in order, I don't mean your personal house, I mean your practice. They've got money understandings down, they've got their clinical down, they've got their confidence and deserving down, they've got the new patient experience down. Um, you know, Paul, do you mind if I call on you because I see your little head up there and I love your voice. And Paul, I feel like you fit in this category. I'm going to add a spotlight. I'm just going to brag on Paul for a second. And Paul, you're muted, by the way. Paul,
Hello?
Paul, I don't think does much of any like money spend or physical energy on new patient attraction. And Paul's been in the patient mastery community for probably 4 or 5 years as one of our tribe coaches. So he teaches other chiros in the program, and he's one of the top pediatric chiropractors in the world, let alone Australia. And Paul, could you attest to that? What I was just talking
Yeah,
about, getting the number of new
yeah.
patients.
So there's no time spent on social media from me. That's not something that interests me. I'm not strong on it, and I haven't found I've needed to. Josh's materials. I totally agree with that last thing that you said there, Josh. That if this clinic is using the systems that I want it to use, and if I am in the space that I want to be, I really don't think that well, I haven't, it's proven that I don't need to be spending money or time on something that doesn't bring me joy, first of all. It doesn't bring me joy. And people just talk to people, don't they? You use the phrase word of mouth, and that's something that we're all aware of. But if we can maximize that through turning up, really properly turning up, full body, full mind, and full heart for one at a time for whoever comes in, then I really do attest to that, and I talk about that in our tribe groups, that there's a lot of time and energy that gets spent by chiropractors themselves, not even their CAs, but themselves. And I just think their time could be better spent on upskilling.
Right. And just to bring it full circle, so it's not saying don't put any energy or
No,
money into marketing,
no.
but the trap that chiropractors fall in is we do that, we put the cart in front of the horse and don't have our deserving belief, our value, our fees, our new patient experience. We don't have that owned and honed. And then there's a combination of leaky bucket where people come in and then just disappear, or there's just that energetic metaphysical, what's the opposite of attraction? Repulsion,
Yeah.
because you don't have your stuff in order. Yeah.
That's right.
One other thing I would say is that I also don't, I utilize postings on social media, but I don't actually pay for social media ads either. So I don't like pay to put stuff up there. I just put things up, success stories and things like that. So, but you know what Paul said though is cool, because hey, if you don't have to do that either, don't. Why not? Don't put the energy out there if you can get that, if you can do that without it. And I probably could. Um, I just think it's cool seeing really flashy lasers on social media posts. So,
But you notice also, Tori, you enjoy doing that aspect. So there's
yeah,
also that element of that
yeah,
energy. Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of people will say things like, "Oh, I've been following you for a year or on social media, but I finally just got up the courage to schedule an appointment."
It's the long game. You've got
Yeah.
to play the long game in life and practice and business. That's the only way. Paul, thanks for jumping in with that beautiful Australian voice.
My pleasure, mate.
Yeah. Tori, anything else we're going to finish this up. You want like any last nugget or inspiration or hope? Because chiropractors who got on this, we play the long game at Patient Mastery. The typical chiropractor is either like, I've heard you speak for 40 minutes or 2 weeks and you're exactly what I need, or I've been following you for 3 to 5 years. And it's like, you know what? I've heard enough success stories or enough good free stuff that you've given. Like, let me give it a try. What's the best thing you could tell docs listening?
I I think that kind of what you just touched on, I used to operate from the mentality of a microwave, and I've switched now to a crock pot, right? It's like I think more along the lines of, um, you know, this is, and I don't want to make this sound like this was an overnight thing. I hope no one thinks that. It's been a process, but one that has paid tremendous dividends, not only financially but personally and professionally, um, and this is what I think I looked for early on in my practice, was a system I could follow that didn't turn me into a robot, that didn't, you know, try to turn me into someone I wasn't, and that allowed me to be me while at the same time providing great care and great service for the people that I see. And, you know, even though we're talking about how we run the office, and being professional, all that, my patients have become an extended family. And I get invites to, weddings, to baby blessings, to marriage, or even I even get asked to attend funerals of family members who passed on. I mean, and some people may say, yeah, but I don't want to be that, and that's fine. If that's not your game, that's fine. But it's like you build relationships with these people. And I think I've even had some patients, and I think this is important too. I've had some patients who, you know what, I was not the right fit for them. What they needed a care that was outside of what I could provide them, and um, that was referring them out. Just because I did that, they turned around and sent me friends, because I think it was because they realized I could be trusted, and that I was going to do what was right for them and not try to see what I could get out of that. And but I think the system in patient mastery for me has made things so smooth, so helpful, and has decreased a lot of stress in my life. So thank you so much for that.
Hey, Tori, you shared from the heart. You shared honestly and authentically. You're watching this live. Can you throw not just a thank you in the chat for Tori, because pretty much no one's dropped off, so obviously it's been valuable. But what would be more valuable is sharing like what was one thing you needed to hear, and we'll count that as the thank you, or you can add it in with it. But like, what's the one thing Tori said, or what's the most important thing that you needed to hear today, tonight? Yeah, throw some love in the chat. Paul already did because it's probably 8 a.m. for him and he's got a new patient coming in. Thank you again, Paul, for being on. But yeah, throw some love in the chart. So Danny Williamson wrote heart. That's meaningful. You don't write a paragraph, something short and sweet. Christian going from microwave to crock pot. That's so beautifully put. I've never heard that one before, Tori.
I think that was a Dave Ramsey thing, actually.
And old gurus or old school may not be the right way for you today. I could, unless you love banging your head against the wall. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dan. Galaxy, charge what worth. Paul, you backed yourself and was courageous. Yeah. Guys, if you're stuck in that, this is so common in chiropractic to be stuck in that 20s to 30s to 40,000 collections. And that's collections. So like what you're actually taking home after taxes, oftentimes for what you graduated with debt, or what you want to save for the future to be able to retire, like with the lifestyle you want, let alone giving your family the lifestyle they want now, that's not cutting it. And to be able to have a process, we call it patient-centered growth strategies. You're not going to feel like a salesperson. You're not going to be scaring people into care. You're not going to have to over-educate people or drown them in education. So that's one, patient-centered growth strategies. Then deserving headspace for success. If you're a chiropractor like me, I guarantee you've got a lot of junk in your headspace because our profession will do that to you. So that's the second component. Clear that out. Boom, sky's the limit. And then CEO financial mastery, when you understand the percentages that need to go where, and you don't have to try to figure it out on your own, things fall in the right place. So that three-pronged approach. And then you have people like Torry that you rub shoulders with and can ask questions, or Paul, who you just heard, and you have just phenomenal coaches, both in our system or DC coaches on the platform, as well as coaches on my team. The amount of calls and community and events that are always going on, it's phenomenal. And because of that, as a community in patient mastery, we've gotten tremendously specific on who we work with and who we don't work with, because there's a lot of chiropractors, if the goal is just money, Lamborghini, ego, all of that, hey, it's not going to be a fit. And that's okay. There's other groups out there for you. I promise you'll find them. I'm dropping in the chat right now. If you want to talk, like literally talk, not a sales call, not a sales pitch, like actually get under the hood of what's missing, stopping you from getting to your next level, stopping you from doubling, you can apply to speak to one of my coaches. You should be able to click that link and it opens up a web page rather than having to retype it out in the chat, dcgrowthcall.com. We give certain chiropractors an opportunity to speak to one of my coaches and really see what's missing, what needs to be fixed. And then, hey, do you want to work with us to actually get one-to-one personal attention plus group attention plus the patient mastery proven process? It's your choice. Hey, John, thanks for the, and Tori, make sure you're looking at the chat box.
Yeah, I've been trying to look at it real quick. I think I just hearted one of them.
Yeah, so dcgrowthcall.com, if you want to see what most likely on your own you can't see because you wouldn't still be doing it if you're staying stuck, we will show you what's missing. And that is one of the keys to growth, is not what's the new things and putting more things in your backpack as you're growing. We'll oftentimes show you what you can let go of and stop doing that's dragging you down from getting up that hill of more profits, more time off, being considered the go-to chiro in your area, and just as importantly, loving practice. So dropping it in the, no, that's not it. dcgrowthcall.com if you're serious about not staying where you are, not banging your head against the wall, loving practice, and being the go-to doc. Torry, I'll let you have the last word.
No, I think after years of, like you said, banging my head against the wall, it's just nice to have a direction. It's nice to know that I've got things going in the right direction, and um, and I think this is what all of us went to chiropractic school for from the beginning. You know, it was to be able to help people and um, you know, and have a change people's lives. And I believe in chiropractic. I believe in the work we do. And it still astounds me how few people have actually ever been to a chiropractor. Um, and so I think that we have so much to offer to the world, to the population, and um, and we deserve to get paid for what we're worth. And it's just this symphony, if you will, of us providing a service and helping people get their lives back. Because if honestly, I hear so many stories, and this is not to knock the medical profession, but I'm just saying I hear so many stories, and I was getting kind of a little hacked off yesterday, and at some of the stuff that I hear from medical doctors and that are being told to patients. And if we're not going to help these people and put ourselves in a position so that we can keep our doors open and keep providing that service, I mean, who's going to do that? You know? And
You're
but
absolutely right.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love this work.
Dude, there's nothing you could do about the medical profession and what they say or don't say about us. There's nothing you could do about what our profession does internally. And I'll tell you guys that one of the reasons why we don't see more people is because our profession operates at the level of, in let's say healthcare, let alone professional professions. We operate based on our history and our leadership and how things are taught, I would say at the elementary school playground level. That is chiropractic. That is why when I said I wanted to become a chiropractor and I was committed, every week for the next few years, my mom said, "You sure? Why not? Why not medicine?" Yeah, that doesn't feel good for the most significant person in your life. So chiropractic as a whole, we operate at the level of the elementary school playground. I would even say kindergarten. What I'm committed to with patient mastery is bringing it to the high school varsity field. That's something I'm proud of. Those are the docs I like to work with, see grow, and surround myself with. And there is a profound difference you'll notice when you rub shoulders with patient mastery docs of quality, integrity, success, without ego, without BS. It's a cool playground to be on, or varsity field. All right, this has gone long enough. It's almost past my bedtime. Torry, you rock. I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks at the next event. And you guys need anything, you know where to find us. Stay strong, stay focused. Don't keep doing the same thing if it's not growing. Time to change. All right, you guys rock. Keep helping people get back to their life. You deserve an amazing life for it. See you soon.